There's so many simple choices that you can make, but the first choice that you must make, and I've tried to emphatically say this before, and I'm going to say it again because Nate said it so well. If you do not first choose to follow Jesus, and if you don't know what that means, it's going to start with a very open-handed, I'm just going to make a choice to see what this is all about. But for others of you, it's time to really get off the couch and do something about it. Because if that is not first, your physical health means nothing. Your professional success means nothing. And as a matter of fact, as scary as I am to say this, I will say this. You as a husband and a father to your family means nothing apart from you first putting your faith in Christ. Because without that, everything that you are doing in this world is finite and will end. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Unlocking Greatness. I cannot believe I am saying that we are in season 5. We will be a couple of episodes into season 5 as this episode goes live. But man, it has been a wild journey and a lot of iterations. My guest and I today, we're actually recording this just a couple of days post 2025 New Year. And so it's a head full of steam, a heart full of courage, just so many things that hopefully will come out as we have this conversation today. So my guest is Nate Whitson. Nate and I, like so many other discussions I've been having lately, and you guys have been hearing, came by random interaction on X. I mean, I guess nothing is random. And by the way, X is Twitter. I have to keep clarifying that. But I've just continued to both reach out to, engage with, ask for, and really try and curate into my own feed other like-minded men. And for me, that is men in pursuit of Jesus, that are husbands, that are fathers. They don't have to be those things, but those being important things in their life, and wanting to achieve some level of excellence, success, greatness in all those areas. I don't really care whether or not people have made 6, 7, 8, 9 figures, whatever they're lying about, nowadays. But I really just love to see guys doing the thing. And I had a previous conversation with Nate, and through that, just learn, and we'll talk a little bit about his ministry. By the way, he is the founder of a ministry called Get in the Fight. So we're going to talk about that. I'm really pumped to have that discussion. But for now, Nate, what's up, dude? Welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no. I think that one of the things that I have been so stoked on is really just this idea that, social media gets a really bad rap. And I think there's a lot of good reason to give it a bad rap. Even as men, I think it's probably, 2 or 3 times a day at least that I'm getting a DM from some bot account that has some kind of pornographic content to it. And so for that reason alone, there's a great argument to be made, like, stay away, because it's very easy to just click the picture, right? I mean, and I'm actually very thankful that with X, typically you have to unhide the picture, but that's there. And so that's trash. And then it's easy to get in just to the kind of trash cycles of bashing on people or the negativity. I mean, here again, we're recording a couple of days post New Year's Eve, and we saw 2 what looks like, and I would say were, terrorist actions taken against people in our country, one in New Orleans, one in Las Vegas. Lives were lost, and so you can get into that trash. And so there's so many bad things. But where are you finding, I guess I'll say, where are you finding like the greatest blessing or the greatest benefit to social media for yourself right now?
Yeah, man. I mean, this is it. This conversation we're having, just your intro is the biggest blessing, is purposefully looking for Christian men who are getting in the fight to be better husbands and fathers and followers of Christ, and they're out there. So like, that's the benefit. The garbage is everything you said and so much more. If you open that door, you will find it. But what's interesting is when you open the other door, when you actually try to fill the feed with guys like you're finding out oh, wow, there's a lot of us out here. And it's this really cool thing just to see the church, capital C, Christian men getting after it and go man, we're all over the place. We forget that. So I think that's the big blessing to me, is you go man, this is happening and God is doing what he wants to awaken men. And X is giving us a chance. Other platforms are giving you a chance to go that's where it's happening. And it's really cool to see.
Yeah. One thing that I've really loved about X as well. And I think that a lot of things have been positive as the result of Elon jumping into this world. But it really did seem to free up a natural algorithm that is allowing people to go find each other. Obviously, they're bending it in different ways. I'm certain of that.
For
but,
sure.
But I think that it's been so cool to be able to ask and receive. And I mean, I guess for all of us, we would probably want to ask and receive for a lot of revenue in our businesses as well. And that's not quite there. But I think that it's been so cool. And you're right. There are so many people doing such great things. And that's why I don't even remember how long it's been. I mean, it's probably only been a couple of months since we've connected, but I loved the message that you brought to the table right away, which was to get in the fight. And I think that that is something that it is significantly missing from church, from Christianity, and even from this narrative around masculinity. And so where for you did you begin to see the need to enter into that fight and start rallying other guys to do the same thing?
Yeah, man. That's so great. Sadly, it wasn't birthed out of like just consistently being in the fight, but just the opposite, just being very transparent here. It was mid-fees, having grown up in the church my whole life, loved Jesus as long as I can remember, grew up in a good home, have always been active in ministry of one kind or another. I do financial planning as the 9 to 5, but like ministry is my life. And I've always been involved in it, leading worship, youth groups, different things, ministries along the way. But found myself like several years ago, like I tell this story and it's just kind of like telling for me, but it's like I got out of the shower one day and there's this long full-length mirror, and I'll keep this, PG, of course, but I'm putting my pants on, getting out of the shower, and I look over to my right, and I see this mirror, and I'm bent over halfway to pull my pants up, and I see this fat belly just kind of like hanging over, and I'm like, what happened? Like I was an athlete in high school and college, pretty decorated locally and did well with that. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 240, 250 right now. And I used to be considered, like athletic and in good shape. And I cared about those things. And I only say that just to say, like, I had gotten so far away from the standard. And the message that I got in that moment was, dude, you got out of the fight and you got to get back in it. And that's really what it was birthed out of. I never intended for this to turn in what it's become, where men are from around the world gathered in this online community and this ministry and I never intended for any of it. I literally felt like God woke me up from the slumber. And that was the message, was you got to get in the fight because you're clearly out of it. And so it really, for me, was just, I quite literally just was like, I got to just start walking down the road and back. That's how far away from mission I had been. And so I said, I'm just going to walk down the road and back, and 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, like the lowest bar, right? But all of that conversation and all of that like initial movement was getting into the fight. And then it just snowballed, just like it always does. If you can start moving towards a mission, then all of a sudden it births all other kinds of things. And so for me, man, there's a lot more to that story, but that was the initial get in the fight. It was just a personal call to wake up.
One of the things I guess a couple of things that I appreciate in that obviously is seeing and admitting you have your own problem. I was talking to another guy yesterday, and we were just talking about the benefits to celebrate recovery for those in addiction. And I love the fact that it has to start off with you admitting that you have a problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that for so many men, especially, it's easy for us to deflect from admitting that we have a problem, especially when we can look out into the world and clearly see that we don't have as big of a problem as other people have. It's like when I talk about addiction, I was never truly an addict, and yet I have a very addictive personality mm-hmm. that caught me up into some pretty heavy seasons of partying, drugs, light drugs, so pretty much just marijuana, but for a long period of time, a lot of alcohol. That addictive personality also took me into pornography and strip clubs. That addictive personality also took me into gambling. And so it's like there are different levels to this, and it's very easy to look out and go, well, I only drink on occasion, and I really never black out, so I'm good.
Yeah.
Or like you, I've been over and man, I got a little bit of a belly, but you know what? I mean, for me, this would be me. It's like, but I'm 46 and, guys my age are typically, like full dad bod and I'm not there and I'm just getting old and it's harder. I mean, obviously being an athlete, I think it was probably very different for you then, but I mean, do you have a personality that is quick to point out your need to change? Or is this something that you have really had to work on post athletic career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm probably quick to recognize it in me. But what I had done that I think is so common is like like I always tell guys, like you don't drift to greatness. You drift to apathy. Apathy is when you simply do not want to experience pain. I'll do anything to avoid pain. And in this case, it's kind of like the pain of eating right, the pain of getting right physically, the pain of like having to engage with my family and engage with my marriage, engage with the parts of me that are kind of broken, right? All of that stuff is painful. And so I think I'm quick to recognize it, but I had been so numbed out for so long that getting back in the fight was like really painful, and yet I see it. Yeah, of course I see it. And I'm probably one that's like pretty quick to just be very vulnerable and open, super honest about things. That's not difficult for me. But I had let it go so far that, again, just like the momentum it took to get out was pretty intense.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig that. And I think that's probably one of the truest marks of a good male leader is the willingness to be vulnerable in as unfiltered of a manner as is humanly possible. And obviously, there's context that's necessary to that, and there's appropriate levels and places. But I think it is extremely important. It's fine that we're talking about fighting and being tough and gritting it out and building and strengthening and all those things. But we would be a liar if we didn't admit that we also deeply hurt and cried about things, felt debilitating, moments of anxiety or whatever. And I think what ends up happening, at least I found this in my own sphere, is it's easy for people to perceive us as kind of having it all together, even when we're not trying. And so they become fearful of admitting that there's anything wrong with them at all. And so then what do? Well, what guys typically do, which is isolate further.
Yep.
And they just take all that in. They don't want to do anything about it because doing something about it, a lot of times because they don't know how to do anything about it, they then just internalize that even farther. And so they're just stuck in the cycle of, and I love the word you used, of really this kind of like apathetic ignorance almost to just sit and further fade into non-existence.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something about being honest and raw and vulnerable that unlocks everything that you needed. And you're right. I think you mentioned like the key word, like we just isolate ourselves so far from being around people that are doing great things, from our feelings, like you mentioned addiction, a lot of the ministry that ends up coming out of getting the fight ministry is dealing with pornography and unwanted sexual behavior. And so one of the certifications that I carry is as a sexual addiction recovery professional. And in that, again, instead of being birthed out of greatness in my life, it was birthed out of weakness. And so for 20 some years of 47, 48 years now from my life, it wasn't a day-to-day addiction as I'm qualifying it, and I shouldn't do that, but it wasn't this overwhelming addiction. But what I never actually wanted to even call it that, because it would be once a year, twice a year, there would be this trip up moment of like, how the crap did I end up over here? And until I really kind of got serious about dealing with the fact that I couldn't get rid of that thing, then I couldn't get healing until I got to that point. And I mention all this because we're kind of talking about like not knowing how to deal with pain. A lot of addiction is birthed out of pain. A lot of like achievement driven guys, like I think me and you, are actually kind of birthed out of pain. One of the things we struggle with as men the most is dealing with pain. How I feel and what's actually happening under the hood. The Bible says, above everything else, guard your heart. Well, what does that mean? That's cravings, that's desires, that's intentions, that's motivations, right? If we say it in those languages, men tend to understand that. Be very, very careful. Above everything else, guard your cravings. If I just said that alone, now we can have a conversation with a guy that actually can go somewhere. But if you say like guard your heart, he's like, what do you mean, like who I love?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So for me, there was a lot of growth in the last several years, just in like learning how to deal with pain, things that I don't like about me, things that have happened to me, things that I've done that I wish I wouldn't have, right? That's all pain. And what you do with the pain is you either move into, especially if you're like you and I think, with addictive personalities or driven personalities, or call it what you want personalities, we will take all of that pain and tend to put it somewhere to numb and medicate it. And it may not be porn, but it could be gambling. You mentioned all of them. It could be just drivenness, all this stuff. And until you realize like what's actually going on inside of me, you can't get healing.
Yeah. I think that's so fantastic. And I'm going to put a pin in the drivenness, because I think that that's something I want to come back to, because that to me feels like the one that is the most safe for guys to stick themselves into, because it doesn't look evil, destructive, addictive. And yet it's probably the one that is the most evil, destructive, and addictive because it's so nonchalant or accepted. Yes. Before we go there, I do want to touch back on, just because you brought up this kind of sexual struggle. So there was something very fascinating that I discovered. I think I've shared a little bit about this on this podcast before, but so when I lost my virginity, I was 17 years old, I think. Like most kids at that age, and I wasn't a Christian until I was years married even. Anyway, so it was like my opportunity, and I went after it. What I started to realize, though, was my sexual journey from that point forward, up until I met my wife, was showing others that I could. And that was a direct result of my father wound, my dad leaving, me needing to prove to other people that I could be accepted, right? And there was a lot of other things tied up into that. So I come to faith, I get married, 5 years, and a whole bunch of other issues. I get married, come to faith. And so now my wife, it's just me and my wife, right? And I'm not having sex with anybody else. Fast forward all the way until probably a year ago, and I have to be really careful about how I say this, because I don't want to say the wrong thing about my wife. But and we're in the midst of this great season of a sexual relationship with my wife and I, and have been for quite a few years. And I'm listening to John Eldredge, and I think it was on a podcast. And for those of you that are listening, Wild at Heart is kind of his most well-known book. And he's talking about the fact that one of the most overlooked things for men in the sexual experience is the emotional. And I was like, I should probably explore that a little bit more. And my wife and I, again, it's not just the experience of we have sex, like it's deeply emotional, whatever. What I started to realize was when we would go days or maybe a week or something without having sex for whatever reason, it started to get really emotional for me. And it started to tie back into this need to be seen and to be heard. And does she not love me? And which is crazy to think of after I've been married for 23, 24 years.
Yeah.
And yet it was all creeping back in, because that had not been completely healed, even though it had nothing to do with my wife. That's right. So I had to start proactively communicating that with her. And I started then talking to other guys about that, because I'm like, I can't be the only one. I can't be the only one that doesn't just want to get in and hit it with my wife, but I actually want to, enjoy the experience and talk through whatever. And anyway, so I bring that up because, as we're talking about, or just lightly, this, this sexual struggle, and for some guys it is pornography. And by the way, when you start to have those gaps in that sexual experience with your wife, and you have other struggles around that, you are much more susceptible to checking out the chick walking by you, 100%. Which then turns into just stopping on your Instagram scroll, clicking one more click, opening up the hidden picture. Anyway, so I bring that all up because I think we as men need to be talking more about definitely the struggles of pornography, because that I think will always be present because it is so bombarded into our face. But there is so much more, and it's so much deeper, even in healthy sexual relationships, where we need to continually be discovering what makes us tick, what doesn't, how we experience that with our spouse, how we communicate that with our spouse. Again, like, I don't know about you. How long have you been married?
20.
I don't know about you, but for me, it's still kind of awkward to go talk to my wife about how I want to have sex. it blows me away. But again, I was never taught that.
Yeah.
And guys don't talk about that other than just, again, like, I got it, and be done.
Dude, you're nailing something. In fact, this is kind of funny. This month, I have 2 books coming out this year, and they're in a series. And the first one is called Let's Talk About Sex. So this is very funny. This is not pre-scripted. I want you all to know listening to this. We did not talk
I had
about
no idea.
this. So the book is called Let's Talk About Sex, 20 Things That Christian Husbands and Wives Wish Their Spouse Knew or Would Do, but Don't Know How to Tell You. It's 100% what we're saying without you knowing this is coming into the story. We'll have to come back to it if you ever want to, but
heck yeah.
It is literally this conversation, and it was birthed out of this idea of mentoring and coaching and having my own journey and struggle in this very sexual realm, in a sexual society, being a person who wants to be godly and a better husband and father and follower of Christ. And the fact that none of us almost have ever had healthy conversations about sex as kids with our parents or with our spouse, and we don't even know how to broach that. And it is emotional. And so this book was co-written with a lady named Amy McKinley of Ultimate Intimacy, because I really needed a woman's perspective. So she writes through their ministry perspective from what women have said. And mine is written for what we really wish we could blatantly say in a Christian perspective to our wives, hoping that husbands and wives will read this together and heal that divide. Because you're right. Think about like what you've just said. The journey, which is probably super common. Your journey is so common to most men, a lot of men. You're in a Christian marriage. You're getting after it in your ministry. You're trying to be the best dad and husband and follower of Christ. And you're openly admitting that this is really tough. How many years into the woman I love deeply? Why is this so hard? And yet we don't. And in fact, most men just be like, "We just tell me the answer." And I hope that book does that. I'm not trying to oversell it or promote it, but I just think it's amazing that we're having this. And I just want to say one more thing. The follow-up to it is Let's Talk About Sex, and it's written to Christian parents to talk to their teens about sex. Again, it just kind of kept flowing out because it just all made sense that we don't know how to talk about this as men to men, as spouses, or as parents, and we just need like directions. We need like step-by-step guides to have healthy conversations, because it can change your life, right?
Yeah,
so
bro, this is like,
those are coming.
We're going to have this conversation again as soon as book 1 gets released, and then we can do it again with book 2, because as much as like I want to continue to be better as a husband, serving my wife, being in that relationship with her, but also I have 2 daughters that are coming up on 23 and 15, going to be 16 this year. And so I'll try and make this even faster, but no one talked to me about sex as a kid, ever. We just didn't have that relationship in my house at all. So I just figured it out as I went. And obviously, by God's grace, healed so much of the brokenness. And my wife and I have had an incredible journey together. So we raise our 2 daughters. My kids are amazing. I mean, my daughters are nothing like I was, or even my wife was. And my wife is a fraction of what I was in terms of trouble, but we were making bad decisions. And so my older daughter has been dating this guy for about almost 6 years now. And a couple of years back, through a series of events, was told that my daughter was hiding the fact that her friend underage was having sex with her boyfriend. And the parent called me and was like, "Hey, I just want to know that, your daughter knows this." And I'm like, doesn't sound like her, because I think she would come to me, but we'll see. Well, that was after church on a Sunday, and her boyfriend was there too. And I knew the backstory. This guy, he doesn't have a father. His father died when he was much younger, so no leadership in this area. And I'm like, now's as good of a time as any. And no one's prepped me for what's about to happen. And I looked them both in the face and started with, "Hey, this is what I was told, and I don't believe that this is the case, but I need to hear it from you." So she explains, gives clarity, and I'm like, "Okay, this makes sense." I said, "But now while we're on this topic," I said, "it's time to have this conversation." I said, "I know," looking at my daughter, I said, "I know you have already said you've committed to not having sex before marriage." I said, "I think you've said that this is what he's committed to as well. That's what honors the Lord." I said, "But," I said, "we need to have some conversation about boundaries and barriers and things along the way." And what was amazing, first of all, was he the next day at school said to her that that was the best conversation he had had with a male adult in his whole life.
Wow.
Which was fascinating. And we weren't even that close yet.
Yeah.
And by God's grace, we've gotten super duper close. I mean, I believe one day he will be my son-in-law. I'm very proud of that. But along the way, we've had discussions around his social media use. And not that I caught something, but more of like, hey, I just need you to know that this is coming. And it's probably already there. And you may think it's not a big deal, but one day it's going to be. And so anyway, like these things need to be given to us more and more and more, which is why we need more guys out there doing their best to walk the walk and then talking it on a consistent basis. And it's just not happening. And I think it's, again, because we're ill-equipped, we're afraid. It's a little bit, it feels shameful, even when we're trying to talk about it in a good way. So man, I can't wait. So when do you think both of those are going to be published?
This morning, I'm finalizing the first one for married couples. So it'll be within the next few weeks, most likely here on Amazon.
Okay.
So yeah, the second one, I'm not quite sure yet, but hopefully within the first quarter.
Okay. So I'll make sure that we'll get that link into the show notes, because this probably won't publish until it's released. There's a possibility there. So if that's the case, I'll link it to the show notes. If not, and you're listening to this point or watching, if you can obviously reach out to Nate as well, but if you comment or DM that you want to get hooked up with that book, just let us know and we'll make sure to point you in the right direction. Okay, so at the beginning of all of that, one of the things we were also talking about was this kind of idea that men pursuit of achievement. They get head down in their work, success, and oftentimes in the name of I'm providing for my family. I am building for the future. This is all part of my legacy. But in many ways, that is covering up or hiding their need to deal with an issue, or it could be creating its own issues. And so do you see that a lot? Because I'm sure you're engaging with a lot of men that are performing to a higher level. And so do you see that that's regularly the case, where they're kind of like head down in their work or in heavy pursuit of the thing, and they're starting to neglect other things in their life?
Yeah, man. And you said it could be either or, and I'm saying it's both and. And I'm sure that's what you're saying as well, but it's both and. Not only is that what we're pursuing, but we're also hiding something. We think it's good, but it's causing problems in ways that we probably don't even see. Like, one of the hard parts about sin is that sometimes it's built around something that's actually not a bad thing, like achieving well, providing for your family. It's not a bad thing. But where it becomes sinful is when it gets in the way of what God's best was for that, what his original intent was for that. And then the sideline back buildup of it is that it led to problems the whole way. You just couldn't see it right in the beginning. Like, we're kind of grateful that sin doesn't smack us immediately when we fall short. And yet the problem with not being smacked right in the beginning is that it punches you hard later and you go, why didn't I see this coming? And I think achievement-driven issues are like that. We're like, wow, okay, now my kids are 18 and I have no relationship with them. But you know what? I paid for college. I had just posted in our men's ministry that we have a private app that we use. It's a free app that guys get into, and we communicate each day and do devos and all these things in our fight club. One of the things I just posted earlier was like, hey, dads, I don't know who needs to hear this, but your kids don't care if you went on fancy vacations or paid for college if they don't have you. And one of the dads had responded back and he said, man, that one hits me hard today. And he sends a picture in the app of him and his young boy. And he's like, I get so serious about trying to provide, and I'm going to seminary to be a better, to change our lives and all this stuff. But he's like, I'm not good at just playing with my kids. I'm not good at just sitting down on the floor and doing nothing with them, because I'm always moving. And that's us. I mean, that's the story of so many of us. And so we have to have conversations like this. We've got to be around guys that are going like, I want to be driven to the point of being great in God's eyes first. And that would change everything, how I do the rest. I think for many of us, it'll mean probably less money.
Yeah.
It'll probably mean for a lot of us less achieving for what we thought was most important. We all know this. When you die, if you ever had a chance to be 85 and on death's bed and had your family around you in this whole scenario that we've heard of many times, you would never have wished that I achieved more financially and had nobody standing by me. And yet we trade that every day.
Yeah. Dude, I was recording a solo episode yesterday, kind of my year in review and my forward looking into 2025. And one of the pivotal moments in my year just happened about 6 or 8 weeks ago. And I was really just dealing with a lot of anxiety. Business wasn't doing great. I was having coffee with a buddy of mine, and I said, there's these 5 areas of my life, and kind of people lump them differently, but my faith, my family, my friendships and relationships, my health, and my business and finance, right? Kind of lumped it together. I said, as I evaluate my life, as I assess all 5 of these areas, I said, there's only one that constantly gives me fits, and it's the business and finance. I said, and if I had to choose, if I was forced to choose to destroy one of them, I would destroy that one every single time, every time. And so why on God's green earth do I allow the one thing that I would destroy if I had to be the one thing that's constantly destroying me? And it's hard, right? Because there is this tension. We do want to do well, and we do want to provide for our families, and we do want to have nice things. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But it is so easy to allow that to catch us up into this distorted view of what true greatness, true success even looks like. I mean, success is always directly attributed to the accumulation of wealth.
Yep.
When that's not even the definition of success, right? It is the achievement of an end or a purpose. And so it's not even what we define it as, and yet that's what we seem to constantly be caught up in pursuing.
And you got it. I had just this morning recorded a solo podcast as well, and it was on how do you find your mission? And the short answer to tying what you're saying is so right. There's really 2 things, like how am I made? What do I enjoy? That kind of like, what am I naturally good at? Intersected with what is God's purpose? And that's what we miss in this conversation. We're like, what is God's purpose? Not just for me, but in like his big purpose, that people would know him and his son, Jesus Christ. When you can find ways to intersect what you enjoy, what you like, what you're good at with what his purpose is, you find like a mission worth waking up for every day. And all of a sudden you stop caring a little bit less about item number 5 that you just talked about. It still matters. It's still really good. And it might even be the intersecting point in your particular case of where business and God's big purposes come together. It's just that, is it really his vision you're pursuing or yours? And that's not me pointing, that's me pointing at me, constantly asking that question too. I want to like achieve financially because I got great dreams. I want to give away like crazy. All these things that I think are like genuinely good. But what if it's not what he asked from me? What if he just is like, look, I gave you 1 talent, not 10. And I still will ask the same question. Were you faithful with what I gave you? We kind of intuitively as believers know that that's the right answer, but man, that is tension with me because I hate being average at anything. And so I want to take 1 talent and turn it into 50. And God might be like, you get 1, bro. And I want you to be faithful with 1. And it'll mean you'll be stuck here for a long time. But man, I will say, good job. Good job, son. You did great.
Yeah, man. This to me is why being in deep fellowship with other like-minded men is so critical, because I will constantly spin myself into reasoning ways to continue to pursue more and more and more. And then again, like you said, there are those of us who that is the case, and we will achieve more and more and more. And I pray for the true faithful Christian men, which I believe there are very, very few right now in this world. I pray for the faithful Christian men that will accumulate so much, and it will be so public that it will be a testament to how God can truly provide wild, practical, worldly abundance for those that will do good with it. Because I think we need to see more of that in this world, because many of us are being left to follow people that are not truly honoring God and accumulating all that stuff. But at the same time, we need to be brought down to what you said, which is to truly be held to our purpose, to continue to be reminded of what God is actually calling us to. But I can't do that on my own. I need you. Like you just saying that right now was just another reminder for me that I need to continue to thin out my own endeavors. And that's what I've been working on. I told you that, for the last 2 months, that's what I've been working on for my year in reflection and my pursuit of 2025, as I'm like, the whole goal has been to refine, has been to narrow down and really hone in on the few. And because I'm an ideas guy, and I'm like, oh, I should do this too. And oh, I could do this too. And I could go speak in this area and I could do this. And so that was a great reminder, but I need more of that, which is why I need to be in regular community. And I also need to be in for me, that community needs to be with guys that are willing to say, we're going to fight about it. You know, like that's why like real biblical strength and masculinity is also required. I need the toughness. I need the grit. I need a little bit of gangster, you know, because when it's just this soft, like the Lord is going to guide you into, I'm like, bro, you lost me, you know? There's a place for that, just not for me.
That's fascinating you say that. There's so many guys, and I want to be careful not to lump it all into younger men today, but it certainly seems to be more of the younger men I speak to, that they just really struggle to be talked to directly. But like I grew up with a football coach, it'd be like, hey, shut your mouth and be quiet and, you know, suck it up and act like a man. And I needed that terribly at 17 years old. And we have a lot of guys now where I'm like, bro, what are you doing? You're struggling in this sin and you know why you're doing it. What are you doing? And he's like, whoa. Like, and I'm like, I haven't even gotten hard on you yet. I'm not a really hardcore guy. But we can't even speak directly to some men without it being like, bro, I can't handle this. And yet there's some of us that are like, look, I don't want you to be a prick, but I want you to be direct. And I think it's birthed out of, for me, like in our ministry, as guys come, I'm kind of saying, you tell me what you want from me. Because if you say you want direct, again, I'm not going to do it in a way that's like demeaning or harsh or acts like I got it all put together. But if you're saying that's what you need and what you want, then we're going to handle accordingly because I know that's who you are.
Yeah. That's really good and really helpful. And again, I think that, you know, it's time for us to break the cycle again and again and again. And, you know, throughout generations and generation, there have been deep struggles in that generation and tendencies of the culture. And I think we're in a place where it's like, wake the F up, snap out of it, and get your shit together. And that's what many, many people need. It's not time, at least and again, there's a time and a place for this, so I don't want to lump everybody in, but I just don't feel like it's time just to softly whisper into another guy's ear that he needs to get it together. Because as I look out at the culture, and I look out at the world, as always, but we are in the fight of our lives. And God clearly calls you and I to first fight for our families, to fight for those closest to us. But I mean, I was posting something this morning on Instagram, and I said, like, you know, I can't stop thinking about the fact that, you know, there's a number being thrown out that there could be 500,000 undocumented children in our country that nobody knows where they're at. Yeah. And there's no way that you can't assume that the mass majority of those are not trafficked. I don't know if God will ever call me specifically to do something about it, but I'm going to be deeply angry about it inside, and I'm going to figure out any single way that I can lend a hand in that fight, right? Or just the travesty and evil that we see day in and day out and so many things. It's like, I'm going to put myself in harm's way to protect the vulnerable. We need to see more of that. And I just don't think that we're there yet, at least in the Christian community. I think we just kind of lost that way because of so many things that Christianity has gone through in the last couple of, probably 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, man, I got two quick thoughts for you. As you're saying, and number one is, as you speak like this, as you are like genuinely just giving yourself through and again, if this is your show, but for anybody that's not following you, like you're a great follow, like you give high quality things that guys just need to hear and speak. And so I hope they're following you with these things and listening to these shows, because this could be the way that you engagement in a way that when God calls them, they're ready. Like this could be the way that you actually do something about the tragedy that you see, the travesty of that. Like he may not call you potentially to that very thing, but by you helping to awaken men from slumber in their own life, some of those men are called to that and they're asleep right now. And so as you help do that, man, that's your piece of that, and just remembering too, like we have to have relationships. I grew up in a hardline, what would you call it? Like just a really kind of a strict church where there's like, we're right and we're going to tell you the answer and you're wrong. And so I grew up like with that spoke to me where I don't respond well when somebody's just like hard, but I don't know them. I'm like, why are you yelling at me? You know what I mean? Like as much as like I want directness, I want relationship. And I really feel like men need to know that I care about you. Like my football coach cared about me enough to say like, you need to do more. But it was never like the stranger saying it. This was a man that I needed to hear those words from. And so to your point, we need to be in deep relationships with godly men who are broken like you are, like I am. And we just try to be broken together in a way that we get stronger. And I think if we do that, we start to change the world.
So good, man. Well, I know that. So you have Fight Club that you're calling guys to get in the fight. You have a newsletter I saw that guys can subscribe to. So we'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. The book is coming out. Dude, I'm so pumped for that.
Thank you.
Totally the Lord, right? I mean, we had nothing planned. We had no idea. We didn't even talk about that in our last discussion. So I'm stoked for that. So we'll make sure to share that. If it goes into the show notes, if it's in time, we'll do that. If not, and by the way, if there's any way that I can help to rally people around, like launch day, Amazon, anything like that, please let me know. I know how critical that is.
Thank you.
To get people to support that, and I'll try and get as many people that follow me to jump into that as well. So we'll make sure to do that. Is there anything else that you want to share before we land the plane once and for all?
No, man, that's great. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate what you're doing. Again, I genuinely believe that when God brings together men who are fighting like this, it's a part of just what he's doing. And I want to give God glory in that, because this is something he's doing. It's not because Ryan and Nate are something special, but he's doing something special in guys like Ryan and Nate and like every guy that's listening to this and that. And I want him to stand out. That's what I want. Like, turn to him, wake up, listen to him, right? Get around Bible teachers who believe the whole thing is true still, right? And get into a community in Ryan's groups, in Fight Club. You can go to getinthefight.club and check it out. There's lots of these places out there, but live your life to the fullest and don't have regret.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. Well, guys, I mean, what Nate said there at the end, I think is probably the most important starting place. And we never really got to this, but he said that when he bent over and looked in the mirror and saw the belly, that it started with just like walking to the end of the street, was kind of the idea, just to get started. And there's a lot of ways that you can get started. You can tie up your shoelaces and go for a walk yourself. You can just choose to not consume so much or any alcohol. You can choose to just start complimenting your wife on a day in and day out basis. Whatever. There's so many simple choices that you can make. But the first choice that you must make, and I've tried to emphatically say this before, and I'm going to say it again because Nate said it so well. If you do not first choose to follow Jesus, and if you don't know what that means, it's going to start with a very open-handed, I'm just going to make a choice to see what this is all about. But for others of you, it's time to really get off the couch and do something about it. Because if that is not first, your physical health means nothing. Your professional success means nothing. And as a matter of fact, as scary as I am to say this, I will say this. You as a husband and a father to your family means nothing apart from you first putting your faith in Christ. Because without that, everything that you are doing in this world is finite and will end. But when you put your faith into Jesus, the things that he will do for all of eternity as the result of you making that first simple decision will radically change everything. And that's going to be different for you. It's different for me. It's different for Nate. But that is the first simple step that will lead you to a place where, gosh, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. It's not going to be easy, but it will be the greatest blessing and the best choice you've ever made in your life. So with that, Nate, dude, thank you so much. I've just appreciated getting to know you on X. Obviously, this conversation has been so much better. I love what you're doing. I love the Fight Club idea. I love what I've seen there. We'll make sure to get people connected into that. I can't wait to support your book. You guys, this is the dude that you need to be supporting. Every single man listening to this needs to buy a copy of that book, because you need to do a better job about having sex with your wife and talking about having sex with your wife. For the ladies that listen to this, buy a copy of this book and just say, hey, I heard Ryan's podcast and he told me that I needed to give this to you. I have no complaints about our relationship, but you probably have some questions, and just give it off to them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you know where to find me. We'll make sure that you get in touch with Nate. But again, Nate, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Man, appreciate you. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon.